Have you ever wondered which U.S. states have the highest minimum wage? It's a question that often sparks debate and discussion, and for good reason. The minimum wage isn't just a number on a paycheck, it's a reflection of how we value work and the people who do it. It's a key factor in our economy, influencing everything from spending power to the cost of living. Across the United States, the minimum wage varies significantly. In some states, it's as low as the federally mandated floor of $7.25 per hour. In others, it's more than double that amount. This disparity not only affects individual workers, but also shapes the economies of entire states. These differences in minimum wage across our nation paint a complex picture, a picture we'll be exploring in depth. We'll journey from coast to coast, examining the highest and lowest minimum wages and the forces that shape them. So, buckle up as we take a journey across the United States to uncover the minimum wage landscape. The minimum wage in the U.S. is not a one-size-fits-all figure. It's a kaleidoscope, a diverse landscape, a reflection of the economic realities and policy decisions that vary from one state to another. Let's start with a broad overview. To put it in perspective, the federal minimum wage is currently $7.25 per hour. This rate has remained unchanged since July 2009. However, states are allowed to set their own minimum wages, and many have chosen to exceed the federal standard. On one end of the spectrum, we have states like Georgia and Wyoming, where the state minimum wage is a mere $5.15 per hour. However, most businesses in these states are subject to the federal minimum wage due to the Fair Labor Standards Act, effectively raising their minimum wage to the aforementioned $7.25. Then, there are states that hover around the middle of the spectrum. Take Michigan, for example, where the current minimum wage stands at $9.65 per hour. It's a bump from the federal rate, but not by much. On the other end of the spectrum, we find states like Washington, California, and Massachusetts leading the charge with a minimum wage north of $13 per hour. California, in particular, has set an ambitious goal to gradually increase its minimum wage to $15 per hour for all employees by 2025. And then there are states like Alabama, Louisiana, Mississippi, South Carolina, and Tennessee that have no set state minimum wage at all. In these states, the federal minimum wage applies. So there you have it, a snapshot of the minimum wage landscape in the U.S. It's a spectrum that ranges from $5.15 to over $13 per hour, with a lot of variations in between. As we can see, the minimum wage varies greatly, but what factors contribute to these differences? That's a question we'll tackle in the next part of our discussion. Stay tuned. Let's dive deeper into the world of minimum wage, state by state. We'll begin by looking at the states with the highest minimum wage in the country. These states have taken a stand, setting their minimum wage significantly higher than the federal level. First up is California, the Golden State. Here, the minimum wage is set at a golden $15 an hour, which is more than double the federal minimum wage. This high minimum wage can be attributed to the state's high cost of living, particularly in cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles. Next, we journey to the Pacific Northwest, to the evergreen state of Washington. Washington has a minimum wage of $13.69 per hour, which is also significantly higher than the federal level. The cost of living in areas like Seattle plays a major role in this higher wage. Our third stop takes us to the East Coast, to the state of Massachusetts. The Bay State sets its minimum wage at $13.50 an hour. Like California and Washington, Massachusetts also has a high cost of living, especially in the Boston area. Lastly, we head to the Aloha state, Hawaii. In this tropical paradise, the minimum wage is set at $10.10 per hour. While this might not seem as high as the other states we've discussed, it's important to remember that Hawaii has one of the highest costs of living in the country. Each of these states have their own unique reasons for setting their minimum wages higher than the federal level. Cost of living is a common factor, but other considerations might include the local job market, the state's economy, and the political climate. These states lead the pack in terms of minimum wage, but what about the rest? Moving on, we explore more states and their minimum wage policies. As we delve deeper into the heart of the United States, we find a rich tapestry of diverse economic policies, each tailored to the unique needs of its citizenry. We're now entering the middle of the minimum wage spectrum, where the policies are as varied as the states themselves. Let's start with Colorado. Known for its rugged mountains and breathtaking landscapes, Colorado also stands out with its progressive wage policies. The state has a unique system where the minimum wage is adjusted annually based on the cost of living. This approach, while not without its detractors, aims to ensure that workers can afford the basics in a state known for its high cost of living. Next, we journey to the Sunshine State, Florida. Here, voters approved a gradual increase of the minimum wage to $15 per hour by 2026. This plan demonstrates a strategic approach to wage increase, balancing the needs of workers with the potential impact on small businesses. We then move west to Nevada, a state that's more than just glitz and glamour. Nevada's minimum wage system is bifurcated, with one rate for employees who receive health benefits from their employers and a slightly higher rate for those who do not. This nuanced approach reflects an attempt to consider the overall compensation package, not just the hourly wage. Finally, we find ourselves in the land of Lincoln, Illinois. Illinois has adopted a multi-year plan to incrementally increase the minimum wage to $15 by 2025. The strategy here is to give businesses time to adjust, while also making significant strides toward wage equity. These states, each with their unique approaches, reflect the complexity of the minimum wage issue. They demonstrate that there is no one-size-fits-all solution, but rather a spectrum of strategies, each tailored to the unique economic and social contexts of the individual states. With these states covered, let's turn our attention to those at the lower end of the spectrum. Finally, we look at the states with the lowest minimum wage. As we shift our focus to this end of the spectrum, it's essential to understand that the reasons behind these lower wages are multifaceted. Each state's unique economic conditions, cost of living, and political climate contribute to shaping its minimum wage policies. Take, for instance, the southern states. Many of them have statutory minimum wages that mirror the federal minimum wage, which currently stands at $7.25 per hour. The argument often put forth by these states is that their cost of living is significantly lower than in states with higher minimum wages. Hence, a lower wage is deemed sufficient for a decent standard of living. Then there are states like Wyoming and Georgia, where the minimum wage is even lower than the federal standard, at $5.15 per hour. However, most businesses in these states choose to pay at or above the federal minimum wage, effectively rendering the state minimum wage a moot point. But it's not just about cost of living or the size of the economy. Political ideology also plays a significant role. Some states believe that a lower minimum wage encourages entrepreneurial spirit and job creation. They argue that businesses are more likely to hire when labor costs are lower, thereby reducing unemployment rates. However, this approach isn't without its critics. Many argue that these lower wages can lead to income inequality and poverty, putting a strain on social safety nets. They contend that a living wage, one that allows for a decent standard of living, should be the benchmark for minimum wage policies. These differing approaches to minimum wage highlight the complexity of economic policymaking. They demonstrate that one-size-fits-all solutions are rarely effective and that each state must navigate its own unique set of challenges when setting its minimum wage. Having explored the spectrum, it's clear that a myriad of factors influence minimum wage decisions. So, what does all this mean for the U.S. economy and its workers? Well, it's clear as day that the variety in minimum wages across the states is indicative of the unique economic circumstances each state faces. Some states with higher costs of living have opted for a higher minimum wage, trying to ensure their workers can make ends meet. Others, with lower costs, have kept their minimum wage relatively low, instead focusing on other ways to stimulate their economies. However, these variations can lead to significant disparities between workers in different states. A worker earning minimum wage in one state could be struggling to get by, while another in a different state could be living relatively comfortably. And this brings us to the crux of the matter. The state of minimum wage in the U.S. is a complex, multifaceted issue, intertwined with broader economic, social, and political realities. In the complex world of minimum wage, one thing is clear: the debate is far from over.